Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. We're honored to have with us again Ryan T. Anderson, PhDs with Heritage, a senior research fellow in American Principles and Public Policy. He's been all over the news over the last several weeks, talking about the atrocious Supreme Court decision on marriage, and he's been writing about that for some time, so he's the go-to guy on that issue, founder and editor of Public Discourse. Tomorrow a book is coming out, Truth Overruled, The Future of Marriage and Religious Freedom. It will be available in e-copy tomorrow, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that today. He got his Bachelor of Arts degree from Princeton, graduating Phi Beta Kappa, and also earned his doctoral degree in political philosophy from the University of Notre Dame. Dr. Anderson, welcome to the Joe Miller Show. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you. Happy to be with you.
So Truth Overruled, that came out pretty quickly after the decision a couple of weeks ago. I guess everybody pretty much predicted that it would be a bad decision, but this bad?
It's probably worse than we were expecting. You know, I was drafting this book over the past couple of months because we were all kind of thinking that Justice Kennedy was going to redefine marriage one way or another, but we thought he might split the baby, might say states have to recognize out-of-state same-sex marriages. But, you know, he went whole hog. You know, there's a constitutional right to redefine marriage in all 50 states. He didn't even engage the arguments that the states are making for why they wanted to retain the historic definition of marriage, why that's good public policy. He just ignored those arguments. So unfortunately, you know, I was ready to go with this book. I just had to finish writing a last chapter based upon his opinion, and it was easy to write that chapter because his opinion was so bad and the four dissents were so good that that chapter practically wrote itself. I mean, all you had to do was say, Kennedy says this, but Chief Justice Roberts says this, and the response is better. Kennedy says this, but Justice Clarence Thomas says this, and Clarence Thomas was much better. You go through, and point by point, the dissents just decimated this. But now the big question is, what do we do to protect our freedom, our religious freedom in particular, and what do we do to rebuild a marriage culture? You know, the subtitle of the book is The Future of Marriage and Religious Freedom, because that future is up in the air. That future could be bleak, or that future could be bright. It all depends what you do, what I do, and what your listeners do. We now have to defend our freedoms, and we have to rebuild a strong marriage culture.
Right, and I want you to get into kind of the practical steps, because a lot of folk are just wringing their hands saying, what do we do? And part of it is also the public opinion. I mean, it seems overwhelmingly against traditional values. Another poll just came out this weekend suggesting that a majority of Americans, despite the contrary scientific fact, now believe that homosexuality is genetic. And of course that leads to the perspectives that, well, you know, if they're born with it, then they should have the same fundamental rights everybody else has. And I mean, there are all sorts of nuances that we can argue on all this, but what I'm getting at is public opinion has changed. There's no question about it. Talk to any youth today. I mean, my kids, the folk they interact with, they'll tell you that at least the new generations, they don't want to hear anything except gay marriage. And it's not just a few, it's an overwhelming majority. How do you win this battle when you've got those kind of numbers coming up from the youth?
Oh, sure. I mean, this is the exact same situation that pro-lifers faced 42 years ago, right after Roe v. Wade. You know, they were saying, look, all of the elite opinion, academic elites, media elites, is in favor of abortion. All of the young people are in favor of abortion. And what we know happened is that after 42 years of making the case for life, my generation, the millennial generation, is more pro-life than my parents' generation. Those arguments pay off. Bearing witness to the truth bears fruit. So we now need to do the same thing on the marriage question. That's why I was writing this book over the past couple of months. I knew what was very likely to happen at the Supreme Court, and I knew that ordinary Americans needed to be equipped to defend the truth. So what do we need to do? We need to help young people understand what marriage is, why marriage matters, and why redefining marriage is bad for all of society. The reason that we have an institution like marriage is to get a man and a woman to commit to each other permanently and exclusively as husband and wife, so that any children that result from that union will have both a mother and a father. When this doesn't happen, we see social costs run high, increased unemployment, increased crime, decreased graduation rates, increased premarital sex, increased non-marital childbearing. Everything that you could hope for if you care about your children, you want your children to flourish and succeed, give them the gift of a married mother and father. Everything that you would never want to have happen to your children, have them born outside of the context of marriage, have them be raised by single parents. Those are that's at stake here. Whether or not we're going to have a strong, stable family foundation to our civil society.
Some have argued that given time, people are going to see just the catastrophe that these non-traditional unions produce, and that in fact will also help change the attitude of those in the future toward marriage. Now, Ryan, I didn't ask you this before we got started, but would you like to take a call? We got somebody waiting.
Oh, sure. Yeah, let's do that.
All right, let's go ahead and put on Amy. Amy, you've got a question or a comment about gay marriage?
Oh, hi. Thanks, Joe, and thank you, Mr. Anderson. I appreciate your comments and everything, and I've listened to you quite frequently on many different shows, including Joe's, but I was curious what you thought of this, and I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but I heard about a deal where the Supreme Court decision could be retried within 25 days if a person like a state attorney general puts in an appeal because of, for instance, the Justices Kagan and Ginsburg, who were both they both violated the Supreme Court code by not recusing themselves. And so this article says that that the Supreme Court rule is that within 25 days of a ruling, a attorney general can protest that and ask for a rehearing. I was wondering if you heard that and if you think it would actually possibly happen, especially since there's been several states who are saying we're not going to abide by this ruling and that kind of thing.
Thank you, Amy, for that question. Ryan, is it a done deal, or is there any chance that things could be reversed at the high court level?
Not in the near future. I think, in the short run, the five-justice majority will just repeat what they said 3 weeks ago. So I think we have to think more long-term. We have to think, what do we do, one, to change the dynamics on the court? Elections have consequences, and 2 of those 5 justices that voted to redefine marriage were appointed by President Obama. Who wins the 2016 election, who is inaugurated in January of 2017, will have a big impact on who's sitting on the court the next time a case comes like this, or a religious liberty case gets there. So we have to think more in terms of a long-term strategy. There won't be a quick fix to this, unfortunately.
There are some other medium-term type approaches, too. I mean, there's been a proposal to make Supreme Court justices sit for retention vote, for example. A national vote on retention.
That.
Yep. And I absolutely support it, 100%. I mean, you've got these folk like Roberts out there that just confound people. I mean, his whole jurisprudence before he was appointed to the bench suggested a contrary approach, and then suddenly on Obamacare, just going off the rails there, and then a couple of times going off the rails, not on this marriage issue, of course. I mean, he actually had a very good dissent. But you're right. I mean, these are not the type of things that even if the court were to turn the right way, necessarily are going to be cured. So what else can be done? Tell our audience what they can do to help.
Sure. The central thesis of my book is that we should take a lesson from the pro-life movement. And the pro-life movement did 3 things after Roe v. Wade. First, they said that Roe v. Wade was an activist decision, that Roe v. Wade got the Constitution wrong, and it told a lie about unborn children. And so we've never accepted Roe v. Wade as the truth about children or about the Constitution. We've always been saying it's not the last word. Second, the pro-life movement protected their rights. The pro-life movement said no pro-life citizen should ever have to pay for abortion or perform abortion. And then third, the pro-life movement said we are committing to the long haul of bearing witness to the truth about unborn human life. It wasn't just for the next vote in Congress or the next election. It was a 42-year commitment. We have to do the same thing right now. We have to say that the Obergefell ruling, the same-sex marriage ruling, got the Constitution wrong, and it got marriage wrong, and it's not the last word. We have to protect our freedom, that government won't make us celebrate same-sex weddings or help endorse same-sex marriages. Government should not be coercing traditional marriage people. And then number 3, we have to commit now to bearing witness for the long haul about the truth of marriage. And so what I do in Truth Overruled is I try to spell out those 3 strategies. How do we concretely do it?
Okay, Dr. Anderson, new book, Truth Overruled, The Future of Marriage and Religious Freedom. Get it in e-form tomorrow. Dr. Anderson, thank you for being on the Joe Miller Show, sharing your vision for the future. Get engaged, folks. That's what we got to do. Be back after this.